A hole in open ocean should not form a perfect circle. Water erodes unevenly, and storms hit every angle differently. Yet off Belize sits a sinkhole 300 meters wide and 125 meters deep, so symmetrical it's visible from orbit. And for decades, divers lacked the gear to reach its true bottom. In 2018, a submarine team went anyway, straight through the layer where nothing survives. The hole that looks perfect from space. The Great Blue Hole sits inside the Lighthouse Reef Atoll, roughly 60 miles off the coast of Belize City in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. Local fishermen knew about it for generations before the outside world ever heard of it, describing a deep, dark circle of water sitting inside an otherwise shallow, brightly colored lagoon. Measured from above, the hole stretches about 300 meters across, roughly 1,000 feet, and drops to a depth of approximately 125 meters, or 410 feet, straight down. From directly overhead, the hole looks almost unnaturally round, a deep sapphire circle ringed by pale turquoise shallows, a contrast sharp enough that it has been photographed from the International Space Station. It sits within the Belize Barrier Reef Reserve System, the second largest barrier reef network on Earth, after Australia's Great Barrier Reef, which earned the entire reef system UNESCO World Heritage status in 1996. In 2012, the Discovery Channel ranked it the single most amazing place on the planet on a televised list counting down 10 of the world's most remarkable natural sights. Recreational divers who visit the upper rim of the hole today typically encounter a surprisingly active reef ecosystem, including Caribbean reef sharks, bull sharks, and occasional hammerhead sharks, patrolling the shallower waters where sunlight still reaches. That biodiversity has helped the site remain one of the most sought-after diving destinations in the entire Caribbean, even though the vast majority of visitors never travel anywhere close to the true bottom of the hole itself. None of that fame explained what was actually down there. Recreational divers had spent decades circling the upper rim of the hole, admiring reef sharks and coral formations in the first 100 feet or so of water, but almost nobody had confirmed what sat at the true bottom, 400 feet beneath the surface. Understanding that gap between fame and actual knowledge starts with understanding exactly how a perfectly round hole like this even manages to form in the middle of an open ocean in the first place. How 4 ice ages built one perfect circle. The Great Blue Hole did not form underwater at all. It began its life as a dry cave, carved out of limestone rock, the same way caves form on dry land anywhere else in the world, through slightly acidic rainwater slowly dissolving the stone from above over thousands of years, a geological process scientists call karstification. This is the same basic process responsible for cave systems found across the wider Caribbean and Central America, including the extensive network of cenotes found throughout Mexico's nearby Yucatan Peninsula. Geologists studying rock and stalactite samples pulled from inside the hole have determined that this cave system formed in at least 4 separate stages, tied to 4 different periods when global sea levels dropped low enough during past ice ages to expose the limestone plateau that would eventually become Lighthouse Reef. Dating on those samples points to major formation episodes occurring roughly 153,000 years ago, 66,000 years ago, 60,000 years ago, and again around 15,000 years ago, each one adding more depth and structure to the growing cave system, while the area sat completely dry and exposed to open air. As each ice age ended and the world's glaciers melted, sea levels rose back up and slowly flooded the cave from below. At some point, the ceiling of the deepest chamber grew too thin and heavy to support its own weight, and it collapsed straight down, leaving behind the nearly perfect vertical shaft that divers know today as the Great Blue Hole. Researchers examining the collapsed walls found distinct ledges sitting at depths of about 21 meters, 49 meters, and 91 meters, marking the different stages where the water level paused for long enough to carve a new shelf into the rock before dropping further. One especially interesting detail turned up when scientists examined the orientation of stalactites still hanging inside the flooded cave. Stalactites always grow straight down due to gravity, which means finding a set that all tilt consistently off vertical by about 5 degrees is not something water alone could explain. That consistent tilt tells geologists the entire underlying limestone plateau shifted and rotated slightly at some point after the stalactites originally formed. Evidence of real geological movement in the land itself, not simply changing water levels alone. The surrounding lighthouse reef atoll itself tells a related story. The atoll's shallow, ring-shaped lagoon formed as coral grew steadily upward and outward around the edges of the same limestone platform that once held the dry cave at its center, meaning the entire structure surrounding the Great Blue Hole today, coral reef, lagoon, and central sinkhole alike, all trace back to the same several 100,000-year history of rising and falling sea levels acting on one patch of ancient limestone. That slow, patient, multi-stage formation process explains why the hole exists and why it looks so strikingly symmetrical from above. It does not explain who actually confirmed all of this firsthand, since understanding the cave structure required someone willing to physically travel down into total darkness and bring back solid proof. The diver who put it on the map. In 1971, French explorer Jacques Cousteau brought his research vessel Calypso to Belize, specifically to study the Great Blue Hole for his television series, The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. Geologists already suspected the hole had a karst origin before Cousteau ever arrived, but his expedition provided the first widely seen, publicly broadcast, visual proof of that theory, filming the submerged stalactites directly and showing television audiences around the world exactly what a drowned cave looks like from the inside. Cousteau's team retrieved physical stalactite samples from inside the flooded cave for laboratory analysis, providing the actual rock evidence later researchers used to work out the timeline of the cave's 4 formation stages. Cousteau was reportedly so impressed by the site that he personally ranked it among the top 10 scuba diving locations anywhere on Earth, a rating that helped transform the Great Blue Hole from a local fishing landmark into an internationally famous diving destination almost overnight. Cousteau's expedition also established the commonly cited measurement of 410 feet for the hole's total depth, a figure still widely used in most references to this day, even though modern sonar surveys have since refined some of the finer details of the hole's internal shape. What Cousteau's team did not do, and what nobody would attempt for almost another 5 decades, was actually send a vehicle all the way down to the true floor of the hole to see, in complete darkness, exactly what had been resting there the entire time. That gap between exploring the upper cave walls and reaching the actual bottom mattered for a reason far more serious than simple curiosity, because the deeper sections of the Great Blue Hole had already claimed the lives of several of the very divers brave enough to attempt it. Why divers kept disappearing. Recreational scuba diving at the Great Blue Hole typically stays within the top 130 feet or so of water, where divers can see the famous submerged stalactites, along with reef sharks, sea turtles, and colorful tropical fish drawn to the shallower coral formations ringing the hole. Beyond that depth, the environment turns into something considerably more dangerous, and not because of any creature lurking in the dark. Below roughly 100 feet, divers breathing standard compressed air face a real, well-documented physiological risk called nitrogen narcosis, sometimes nicknamed rapture of the deep. As a diver descends, the nitrogen in their compressed air supply gets absorbed into the bloodstream at increasing pressure and past a certain depth. That excess nitrogen begins acting almost like a sedative, clouding judgment and slowing reaction time. Divers experiencing narcosis have reported feelings resembling alcohol intoxication or false euphoria, sometimes convincing them they can safely continue descending well past the point their training says they should stop. The effect grows stronger the deeper a diver goes, meaning someone already impaired at 130 feet may feel even more confident and even less aware of the danger by the time they reach 160 or 180 feet. That specific danger explains a genuinely tragic pattern connected to the Great Blue Hole. Multiple technical divers, some of them highly experienced instructors, have gone missing in its deeper sections over the years, their disappearances widely attributed to nitrogen narcosis, clouding their judgment enough to keep descending far beyond safe limits rather than turning back in time. Exactly how many people have died at the site over the decades remains difficult to pin down precisely, since Belizean authorities have not maintained a single, centralized public count, though people closely involved with the 2018 scientific expedition have said publicly that they believed at least 3 people had gone missing in the hole in the years leading up to that trip. That unresolved, painful uncertainty, missing divers whose exact fate nobody could confirm, sat quietly in the background for years. It would take an entirely new expedition, with submersibles capable of reaching the true bottom safely, to finally learn what had actually happened to at least some of them. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hitting subscribe means you won't miss the next one. The wall of chemicals. Nothing can cross. Long before anyone reached the true bottom of the Great Blue Hole, scientific dives had already identified a strange, invisible barrier sitting at around 90 meters, roughly 295 feet down. At that depth, a dense layer of hydrogen sulfide gas blankets the water, a byproduct of bacteria breaking down organic material in an environment starved of oxygen. Divers who have passed through this layer describe it almost like crossing into an entirely different body of water, since visibility and even the color of the light around them shifts abruptly the moment they cross the boundary. Beneath that hydrogen sulfide layer, dissolved oxygen levels drop essentially to zero. Without oxygen, almost nothing capable of active movement can survive there, turning the bottom 100 feet or so of the Great Blue Hole into what scientists and expedition members alike have simply called a dead zone. Researchers examining the same effect have noted the seafloor beneath the barrier is scattered with the shells of conch and hermit crabs, animals that wandered too far from the shallow, oxygen-rich rim and dropped down into water that could no longer support them, dying essentially where they fell. Members of the 2018 scientific expedition described this section in vivid, specific detail once they finally passed through the barrier themselves. Submersible pilot Erica Bergman explained that beneath the hydrogen sulfide layer, it grows extremely dark, dark enough that looking straight back up toward the surface, the only visible light comes as a faint, barely perceptible circle marking the opening of the hole far above, since the chemical layer itself blocks out nearly everything else. This kind of oxygen-free, chemically stratified environment is not entirely unique to Belize either. Similar sulfide layers have been documented in other blue holes around the world, including sites in the Bahamas and in the South China Sea, giving marine scientists a valuable natural laboratory for studying how life behaves or fails to survive in conditions with essentially no oxygen at all. Understanding that this chemical wall existed was one thing. Actually sending equipment through it to document exactly what waited on the other side required an expedition considerably more ambitious than anything attempted before. The expedition that finally went all the way down. In November and December of 2018, an expedition organized by Aquatica Submarines and joined by Virgin Group founder Richard Branson, along with Fabien Cousteau, grandson of the same Jacques Cousteau, who first popularized the site back in 1971, conducted a series of 22 separate dives into the Great Blue Hole. The team used 2 different manned submersibles, an Aquatica Stingray 500 and a vessel called the Idabel, operated by the Roatan Institute of Deep-Sea Exploration, along with sonar equipment supplied by Kongsberg Mesotech, specifically to build the first complete three-dimensional map of the hole's entire interior. Erica Bergman, serving as chief pilot and operations manager for the expedition, described the goal directly, explaining the team wanted a full 360-degree sonar map showing the entire 1,000-foot diameter shape of the hole from every angle, something that had simply never existed before. One dive during the expedition was broadcast live on the Discovery Channel on December 2nd, 2018, letting viewers around the world watch in real time as the submersibles descended toward the bottom. The full documentary covering all 22 dives followed in the spring of 2019, giving researchers and the public a much more complete picture of everything the team had recorded. The team's cameras and sonar equipment picked up several genuinely new discoveries along the way. Around 407 feet down, close to the very bottom, the expedition documented stalactite formations that had never been photographed before, further confirming the cave's dry, Ice Age origins deep within the hole's lower reaches. The team also recorded unusual, unexplained tracks along sections of the seafloor, markings that generated real speculation at the time about exactly what might have caused them, though no definitive peer-reviewed explanation for these specific tracks has been published since. Not every discovery made during the expedition was purely geological. Branson later wrote publicly about seeing plastic bottles resting on the floor of the hole, specifically calling out ocean plastic pollution as a genuine concern the dive had personally driven home for him, alongside broader worries about climate change tied directly to the exposed Ice Age stalactites the team had just filmed firsthand. The expedition also recovered a lost GoPro camera from the depths, with its memory card still intact and playable footage still stored inside, along with a 2-liter soda bottle that had somehow drifted and sunk to a depth of more than 100 meters. None of those findings, however striking on their own, prepared the team for what turned up next, resting quietly near a scattered field of long-dead conch shells at the very bottom of the anoxic zone. The bodies they found waiting in the dark. Near what the expedition team came to call the conch graveyard, the shell-strewn seafloor sitting just beneath the hydrogen sulfide barrier, the submersible pilots came across the remains of 2 human divers. Bergman later explained in interviews that the team believed these remains likely belonged to 2 of the people who had previously gone missing while diving in the hole's deeper, more dangerous sections. The expedition team responded to the discovery with deliberate care and restraint. Rather than disturbing the remains or attempting any kind of recovery themselves, Bergman said the team carefully documented the exact locations and respectfully reported their findings directly to the government of Belize, leaving the resting place of the 2 individuals undisturbed. Speaking about the moment afterward, Bergman described it simply as finding the resting place of a couple of people and choosing to handle that discovery with the same respect anyone would want shown toward a lost loved one. This discovery finally offered some measure of closure regarding a genuine, long-standing mystery tied to the hole's dangerous reputation, confirming that at least some of the missing divers had in fact succumbed to the same nitrogen narcosis risk long suspected to be responsible, rather than leaving their disappearance a permanently open question. It also underscored, in the most direct way possible, exactly why the hydrogen sulfide barrier and the extreme depths beneath it are treated with such serious caution by anyone who dives there. That discovery closed one difficult chapter of the hole's history. A separate, entirely different kind of expedition 4 years later would end up telling an even longer story, one stretching back thousands of years before any human diver ever entered the water at all. The core that recorded 5,700 years of storms. In the summer of 2022, a research team led by Professor Eberhard Gischler of Goethe University Frankfurt funded by Germany's National Research Foundation, transported a drilling platform out to the middle of the open ocean specifically to extract a sediment core from the floor of the Great Blue Hole. The team successfully pulled up a core measuring 30 meters long, representing roughly 20,000 years of continuously accumulated sediment resting undisturbed at the bottom of the hole. The core was later analyzed by a wider research group, drawing on specialists from the universities of Frankfurt, Cologne, Göttingen, Hamburg, and Bern. That sediment survives so cleanly precisely because of the same oxygen-free conditions that make the deep hole so dangerous for divers. Lead researcher Dominic Schmidt explained that the lack of oxygen at the bottom, combined with the hole's layered water structure, allowed fine sediment to settle in undisturbed annual layers, visually resembling tree rings, alternating in color between gray-green and lighter shades depending on the amount of organic material present in a given year. Researchers determined the limestone island that would eventually become Lighthouse Reef was fully submerged by rising seas roughly 7,200 years ago, setting the starting point for the specific storm record the team was able to reconstruct. Buried within those annual layers, researchers identified distinct bands of coarser, lighter-colored sediment called tempestites, deposits formed when powerful storm waves and surges carried heavier debris from the surrounding reef's outer edge into the hole itself. By carefully analyzing these specific storm layers throughout the full length of the core, the research team identified a total of 574 individual storm events preserved in the sediment, stretching back a documented 5,700 years, giving scientists the single longest continuous storm record ever recovered anywhere in the Atlantic Basin. The pattern revealed inside that storm record carried real significance beyond simple historical curiosity. Analysis of the layered data showed that the overall frequency of tropical storms and hurricanes across the southwestern Caribbean has been steadily increasing over the past several thousand years, tied in part to a gradual southward shift in the position of the equatorial low-pressure zone that helps drive hurricane formation across the wider Atlantic. The research team's findings pointed toward a significant further rise in storm frequency across the region during the 21st century as a direct consequence of ongoing climate change. That 5,700-year record transformed the Great Blue Hole from a diving destination and geological curiosity into something considerably more valuable, a genuinely unique scientific archive capable of tracking climate patterns across a span of time no other single site in the region could match. Even with that discovery, plenty about the extreme environment sitting at the very bottom of the hole still remains only partially understood, and comparing it to an even more extreme site discovered just a few hundred miles away puts exactly how much remains unexplored into sharp perspective. How this compares to the world's deepest blue hole. The Great Blue Hole, for all its fame, is not even the deepest blue hole scientists currently know about. That title belongs to a considerably less famous site called the Tom Jaw Blue Hole, sitting in Chetumal Bay along the southeastern coast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, just across the border from Belize itself. Its name comes from the Mayan language and translates roughly to deep water. A local fisherman named Jesus Artemio Putvilla had reportedly known about the site for roughly 2 decades before he eventually connected researchers to it. In September 2021, a scientific team working with Villa's guidance, coordinated through Mexico's EcoSur Research Institution, surveyed the hole using scuba divers, echo sounders, and water sampling equipment, initially measuring its depth at approximately 274 meters, which briefly made it the second deepest known blue hole on Earth at the time, behind only the Dragon Hole in the South China Sea at roughly 301 meters. That initial measurement turned out to be far from the full story. A more thorough follow-up expedition in December 2023 led by researcher Juan Carlos Alzareca Huerta and published in the journal Frontiers in Marine Science in 2024, used a specialized conductivity, temperature, and depth profiling instrument to survey the hole more precisely. That new data revealed Tom Jaw actually extends to a minimum depth of 420 meters, nearly 1,380 feet, instantly making it the deepest confirmed blue hole anywhere in the world, roughly 400 feet deeper than the previous record holder. Remarkably, researchers still have not located the true bottom of Tom Jaw, even with these more advanced instruments, meaning the hole could theoretically extend even deeper than currently measured, with some scientists speculating it may connect to a wider network of underwater caves and tunnels running beneath the bay. Placed side by side, the comparison is striking. The Great Blue Hole in Belize, despite decades of global fame, reaches a documented 410 feet. Tom Jaw, discovered only in 2021 and still not fully measured as of its most recent expedition, plunges at least 3 times deeper, and researchers openly admit they do not yet know where it actually ends. That gap between a world-famous, thoroughly mapped tourist destination and a barely studied hole whose true bottom remains a genuine open question says a great deal about how much of the world's underwater geology remains poorly understood, even in relatively shallow, easily reachable coastal waters close to major cities. That same gap between what has been mapped and what still remains unknown applies just as directly to the Great Blue Hole itself, particularly once the conversation turns toward the specific forms of life capable of surviving inside its oxygen-free depths. What scientists still don't fully know. Despite decades of exploration, real scientific uncertainty still surrounds several aspects of the Great Blue Hole's deepest reaches. The specific tracks documented along the seafloor during the 2018 expedition have never received a definitive, peer-reviewed explanation, leaving open questions about exactly what process or object left them behind in an environment where almost nothing capable of movement can survive. Researchers studying similar oxygen-free blue holes elsewhere in the world have increasingly focused on the specialized microbial life capable of surviving entirely without oxygen in these extreme, sulfide-rich environments. Scientific studies of the Sancha Yongle Blue Hole in the South China Sea, also known as the Dragon Hole, have documented distinct microbial communities living at different depth layers within its anoxic zone, including bacteria capable of processes like sulfur oxidation and nitrogen cycling that allow them to generate energy without any oxygen at all. Separate research on coastal blue holes in the Gulf of Mexico, including a site called Jewfish Sink near Hudson, Florida, has similarly documented oxygen concentrations dropping to zero within just a few dozen meters of the surface, hosting largely uncultivated, scientifically undocumented microbial lineages that remain only partially classified even after dedicated study. Whether the Great Blue Hole in Belize hosts its own similarly unique, still undiscovered microbial communities remains an active area of ongoing scientific interest, since its deep, chemically isolated environment shares core characteristics with these other studied sites. The exact total number of people who have died diving in the hole's dangerous deeper sections also remains genuinely unclear, since no single government agency has published a definitive, complete historical count, leaving expedition team estimates as the closest available figure rather than an official confirmed number. That same note of honest, acknowledged uncertainty applies to the broader scientific picture as a whole. Researchers have confirmed the hole's geological formation history, its 5,700-year storm record, and the specific chemical barriers separating living water from the dead zone below it, while several smaller mysteries, from the unexplained seafloor tracks to the full scope of microbial life surviving in total darkness, remain open questions nobody has fully closed yet. Verdict. Here is where things actually stand. The Great Blue Hole formed over 4 separate stages, tied to past ice ages, beginning as a dry limestone cave roughly 153,000 years ago, before rising seas flooded it and collapsed its ceiling into the near-perfect circular shaft divers know today. Jacques Cousteau's 1971 expedition first brought the site global fame, confirming its karst origins on camera, though his team never reached the true bottom, 410 feet down. A thick toxic layer of hydrogen sulfide sitting around 90 meters down blocks off nearly all oxygen beneath it, creating a genuine dead zone scattered with the shells of conch and hermit crabs that wandered too deep to survive. In December 2018, a scientific expedition led by Aquatica Submarines, joined by Richard Branson and Fabien Cousteau, finally sent manned submersibles all the way through that barrier, mapping the hole's entire interior in 3 dimensions and confirming what many had long feared, discovering the remains of 2 divers who had previously gone missing in its depths, alongside plastic pollution that had already reached even this remote corner of the ocean. 4 years later, a 2022 sediment core, pulled from the same anoxic floor, gave scientists a 5,700-year, annually resolved record of Caribbean storms, among the longest and most detailed hurricane histories ever recovered anywhere on Earth. Even with all of that, the Great Blue Hole is not even the deepest example of this kind of formation on the planet, a title now held by Mexico's Tom Ja Blue Hole, discovered only in 2021 and confirmed in 2024 to plunge at least 420 meters, with its true bottom still not found. None of what these divers found in Belize was a monster or a myth. It was a genuine graveyard of drowned history, both geological and human, sealed for millennia by a chemical barrier nothing living can safely cross. And even now, key pieces of what actually happens in that permanent darkness, in Belize, and in holes even deeper still, remain only partly understood. If this kind of deep ocean mystery is your thing, subscribing helps more of these stories reach you the moment they come out.